The lone rider crested the hill as the summer sun beat down on El Dorado Canyon, Nevada Territory, 1869. Tansy O'Connell clutched her parcels tightly to her chest, her heart hammering against her ribs as she hurried down the dusty main street. She'd stayed too late at Mrs. Henderson's dress shop, and now the shadows were lengthening across the wooden boardwalks. El Dorado Canyon after dark was no place for a woman alone, especially one who'd repeatedly spurned the advances of Frank Miller and his rowdy companions. Tansy quickened her pace as the sound of boisterous laughter spilled from the Golden Nugget Saloon. Her small dress shop lay just beyond the next alley. If she could make it there, she could lock herself inside and be safe. The evening stage had been delayed, meaning her journey home to her small cabin outside of town would have to wait until morning. Well, look what we have here, boys. Frank Miller's voice froze her in place. He emerged from the alley ahead, blocking her path, flanked by two of his cronies. Their eyes gleamed with malice, and even from 10 feet away, Tansy could smell the whiskey on their breath. "Evening, Miss O'Connell." Frank's words slurred together. Mighty dangerous for a pretty lady to be out alone after sunset. Tansy backed away slowly. "I'm just heading to my shop, Mr. Miller. Please let me pass." "Now, where's the fun in that?" Frank took a step closer. "We've been thinking you might need some company tonight." Tansy glanced frantically down the street. The few people still out hurried along with their heads down, pretending not to notice her predicament. Sheriff Taylor was likely at the other end of town dealing with the delayed stage. She was on her own. "I insist you step aside," Tansy said, raising her chin despite her fear. The men laughed, spreading out to cut off her escape routes. Tansy felt her back press against the rough wooden wall of the general store. She was cornered. "Come on, darlin'," one of Frank's friends said, his breath reeking of cheap whiskey. "Frank here's got money. Treat you real nice." Tansy clutched her packages tighter, preparing to use them as weapons if necessary. "Stay back. You heard the lady." The deep voice came from behind Frank and his men. They turned, revealing a tall figure silhouetted against the last rays of sunlight. He stepped forward, and Tansy could see him clearly now, a lean cowboy with dust on his clothes and determination in his eyes. "This ain't your concern, stranger," Frank growled. The cowboy's hand rested casually on his holstered revolver. "You'll leave her alone or face me. Your choice." Tansy had never seen the man before. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent years in the saddle, and his eyes sharp and ice blue sized up the three drunks with cool assessment. Frank eyed the stranger, weighing his options. Though Frank was a bully, he wasn't stupid. The cowboy's stance and the calm way he issued the challenge suggested he knew how to use that gun. "Come on, boys," Frank finally muttered. "Ain't worth getting shot over." He spat on the ground near Tansy's feet. "Another time, Miss O'Connell." The three men skulked away, casting dark glances over their shoulders. Tansy released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you, sir. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." The cowboy tipped his hat. "Victor Xavier, madam, just rode into town." His voice had a pleasant, deep timbre to it. "Would you like an escort to wherever you're headed?" "That's very kind. I'm Tansy O'Connell. My dress shop is just down the street." She studied him more carefully now. He was handsome in a weathered way, with sun-bronzed skin and laugh lines at the corners of his eyes. Not young, but not old, perhaps 30 to her 24 years. "Pleased to meet you, Miss O'Connell. Allow me." He held out his arms, offering to carry her packages. Tansy hesitated only briefly before handing them over. "You're new to El Dorado Canyon?" "Just passing through." Victor fell into step beside her. "Looking for work, maybe. Depends on what I find here." "What kind of work do you do, Mr. Xavier?" "Bit of everything. Ranching mostly. Broke horses for the Pony Express before the telegraph put them out of business. Did some scouting for the army during the war." They reached the small shop with its neat sign reading, O'Connell Dressmaking and Alterations. Tansy unlocked the door, then turned to him. Would you care for some coffee, Mr. Xavier? It's the least I can offer after your help. Victor shifted the packages in his arms. Don't want to impose, madam. It's no imposition. Besides, those men might still be watching. I'd feel safer knowing you were inside for a few minutes. Victor nodded, following her into the shop. The front room displayed several dresses on mannequins, bolts of fabric stacked neatly on shelves, and a counter with a sewing machine. A curtain separated the shop from what appeared to be living quarters in the back. Tansy took her packages and disappeared behind the curtain. Make yourself comfortable. I'll just be a moment. Victor removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair as he looked around the tidy shop. He noticed the fine stitching on the displayed dresses, clearly the work of skilled hands. Tansy reappeared with a tray bearing 2 cups of coffee. Please sit down. She gestured to a small table with 2 chairs near the window. Do you take sugar? Black is fine, thank you. They sat in silence for a moment, each sipping their coffee. So, Miss O'Connell, you run this shop alone? Tansy nodded.
For 2 years now.
My father was a miner who struck it moderately lucky. Not enough to get rich, but enough to buy this shop for me before he passed last year. I live in a small cabin just outside town, but I stay here sometimes when work keeps me late. I'm sorry about your father. Thank you. He was a good man. She studied him over her coffee cup. And what brings you to El Dorado Canyon, Mr. Xavier? You said you're just passing through? Victor's eyes met hers. I've been drifting since the war ended. Thought I might head to California eventually, but I'm in no hurry. The war changed many things, Tansy said softly. That it did. He didn't elaborate, and Tansy didn't press. The silence that fell between them was surprisingly comfortable. Through the window, Tansy could see the street had emptied as night fully descended. Lanterns glowed in windows, and the sounds from the saloon had grown louder. I should let you get some rest, Victor said, finishing his coffee and rising. Thank you for the coffee, Miss O'Connell. Thank you again for your help, Mr. Xavier. Tansy stood as well. Do you have a place to stay tonight? I'll find something. There's a livery stable that looked decent enough for my horse. I can bed down there, if the hotel's full. Tansy hesitated. The Golden Nugget has rooms upstairs, but after tonight. Frank Miller practically lives there. He might cause trouble for you. I can handle Frank Miller. His confident tone left no doubt. Tansy walked him to the door. If you're planning to stay in El Dorado Canyon for a while, I might know of some work. The Thompson Ranch outside town is always looking for experienced hands. Victor placed his hat back on his head. I'll keep that in mind. Good night, Miss O'Connell. Lock up tight behind me. Tansy did as he suggested, watching through the window as he walked down the street, his tall figure soon swallowed by the darkness. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Tansy had spent an uneasy night on the small cot in the back of her shop, startling at every noise from the street. She rose early, washed at the small basin, and donned a fresh blue calico dress before opening her shop. Her first customer of the day was Mrs. Thompson, wife of the ranch owner she'd mentioned to Victor. Good morning, Tansy dear, the older woman said warmly. I've come to check on William's new Sunday shirt. Is it ready? Just finished yesterday, Mrs. Thompson. Tansy retrieved the carefully wrapped package from beneath the counter. I added pearl buttons as you requested. Wonderful. You do such lovely work. Mrs. Thompson paid, and then lingered, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Have you heard? There's a handsome stranger in town. Martha at the hotel says he's quite the gentleman, paid for his room, and didn't cause any fuss, unlike some. Tansy felt a small smile tugging at her lips. I believe I've met him. Have you now? Mrs. Thompson's eyes sparkled with interest. Well, William says if he's looking for work, we could use another experienced hand at the ranch. Spring roundup is coming, and we're short-handed since the Jennings boys left for California. I mentioned your ranch to him, Tansy admitted. He said he has experience with horses. Send him our way if you see him again. Mrs. Thompson gathered her package. And, Tansy, it wouldn't hurt you to think about settling down with a good man. Your father would have wanted to see you happy and cared for. After Mrs. Thompson left, Tansy found herself distracted throughout the morning. Several times, she caught herself glancing out the window, wondering if she would see Victor Xavier again. It was foolish, she knew. He had said he was just passing through. Around noon, the bell above the door jingled. Tansy looked up from her sewing to see Victor himself standing in the doorway, hat in hand. Mr. Xavier, she said, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. Good morning, Miss O'Connell. He nodded, stepping inside. I hope I'm not disturbing your work. Not at all. What brings you by? Wanted to make sure you were all right after last night. He glanced around the shop. And to thank you for the coffee and conversation. I'm fine, thank you. Tansy said aside her sewing. Did you find suitable accommodations? The hotel had a room. He didn't mention if he'd had any trouble with Frank Miller. I spoke with the livery stable owner this morning. Says the Thompson Ranch might be hiring. Mrs. Thompson was just here. She confirmed they need experienced hands. Victor nodded slowly. Thought I might ride out there this afternoon. Before I do. He hesitated. Would you join me for lunch, Miss O'Connell? As a thank you for your kindness. Tansy felt a warmth spread through her chest. I'd be delighted, Mr. Xavier. Though I should be the one thanking you. She placed a back soon sign on her door, and they walked together to the small cafe on the edge of town. Several townspeople eyed them curiously as they passed. Tansy knew there would be talk a young, unmarried woman dining with a stranger, but found she didn't mind. The cafe was run by a Chinese family who had stayed after helping build the railroad. The food was simple but delicious, and the atmosphere quiet compared to the saloon. Tell me about yourself, Miss O'Connell, Victor said after they had ordered. How did you learn dressmaking? My mother taught me before she died. I was 16 then. Tansy's fingers traced the pattern on the tablecloth. After that, it was just my father and me. When we came west, I took in mending to help with expenses while he worked his claim. Eventually, I had enough customers that he bought me the shop. You've built something to be proud of. And you, Mr. Xavier? You mentioned the war. Were you in the cavalry? A shadow passed over his face. Union Army. Began as a scout because I knew the territory. Ended up a lieutenant by the time it was over. And after? After. He looked down at his hands. Strong hands, Tansy noticed, with calluses that spoke of hard work. After was harder in some ways. Everything had changed. The country, the people.
Me.
He shook his head slightly. I've been moving ever since. Ranches in Texas, Colorado. Railroad work for a spell. No family waiting for you somewhere? None left. My parents had a small ranch in Kansas. Raiders burned it during the war. I'm sorry, Tansy said softly, impulsively reaching across the table to touch his hand. For a moment, they sat in silence, connected by shared loss. Their food arrived hearty stew, with fresh bread breaking the moment. As they ate, the conversation turned to lighter topics, books they had read, places they had seen, amusing stories of customers and ranch hands. Tansy found herself laughing more than she had in months. There was something about Victor Xavier that put her at ease, despite having known him for less than a day. After lunch, Victor walked her back to her shop. Outside the door, he paused. Thank you for the company, Miss O'Connell. Tansy, please. And thank you for lunch. Tansy. He smiled, and it transformed his face, softening the hard edges. Then I'm Victor to you. Will you let me know what happens at the Thompson Ranch? If you decide to stay? I will. He tipped his hat and turned to leave, then hesitated. The hotel is hosting a social on Saturday evening. A small band, dancing. Would you consider attending with me? Tansy felt a flutter in her stomach. I'd like that very much. She watched him walk away, tall and straight-backed among the townspeople, before returning to her work with a lighter heart than she'd felt in a long time. Victor returned to town just before sunset, his horse kicking up dust as he rode down the main street. He dismounted in front of Tansy's shop, tethering his horse to the hitching post. The bell jingled as he entered. Tansy looked up from where she was showing fabric samples to an elderly woman. "Excuse me, Mrs. Wilkins," Tansy said to her customer. "I'll just be a moment." She approached Victor, unable to hide her smile. "How did it go at the Thompson Ranch?" "Got hired on," he said, a pleased expression crossing his face. "Starting tomorrow. Mr. Thompson seems like a fair man." "That's wonderful news," Tansy replied, genuinely happy for him. "The Thompsons are good people." Mrs. Wilkins cleared her throat pointedly from across the room. "I should get back to my customer," Tansy said softly. "But I'm glad you're staying. I'll see you Saturday then? For the social? I look forward to it." Victor tipped his hat to both women and left, his spurs jingling softly as he walked. "Mrs. Wilkins raised an eyebrow when Tansy returned. My, the new cowboy seems quite taken with you, dear." Tansy felt her cheeks warm. "We're just acquaintances, Mrs. Wilkins. Now, about that blue silk." The week passed quickly. Tansy found herself humming as she worked, thinking often of Victor and their upcoming evening together. She spent extra time creating a new dress for herself, a deep green silk that brought out the auburn highlights in her brown hair. On Friday afternoon, the bell above her door rang again. Instead of Victor's tall figure, however, Frank Miller swaggered in, alone this time but still reeking of whiskey despite the early hour. "Afternoon, Miss O'Connell," he said, removing his hat with exaggerated politeness. Tansy tensed, glancing toward the street. A few people were visible through the window, which gave her some comfort. "Mr. Miller, I have nothing to say to you after your behavior the other night." Frank's face darkened. "Now that ain't friendly. I came to apologize." "Apology noted.
Good day."
Tansy turned her back on him, hoping he would leave. Instead, she heard his boots on the wooden floor as he approached the counter. "Your new friend might not always be around to protect you, Tansy." She whirled to face him. "That sounds like a threat, Mr. Miller." "Just an observation." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Drifters drift. That's what they do. I'll ask you to leave my shop now." "I'm going."
He put his hat back on.
"But remember what I said. A woman alone in these parts needs friends. Real friends who stick around." After he left, Tansy's hands trembled so badly she had to put down her sewing. She knew Frank Miller was dangerous not just because of his drunken advances, but because his uncle owned the largest mine in the area, giving the Miller family considerable influence in El Dorado Canyon. She tried to push the encounter from her mind as Saturday approached, focusing instead on the pleasant anticipation of seeing Victor again. By the time evening arrived, she had almost convinced herself that Frank's visit had been nothing more than petty intimidation. Tansy stood before her small mirror, smoothing the skirts of her new green dress. She had pinned her hair up with her mother's tortoiseshell combs, leaving a few curls to frame her face. A knock at the door made her heart leap. Victor stood on her doorstep, looking transformed. His usual trail clothes had been replaced with a clean white shirt, dark vest, and polished boots. His dark hair was neatly combed, and he'd trimmed his beard. In his hand, he held a small bouquet of wildflowers. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes taking in her appearance with obvious appreciation. "Thank you." Tansy felt suddenly shy. "You clean up rather nicely yourself." He handed her the flowers with a smile. "These pale compared to you, but I thought you might like them." Tansy brought the wildflowers to her nose, inhaling their fresh scent. "They're lovely. Come in while I put them in water," After placing the flowers in a small vase, she took Victor's offered arm, and they walked together toward the hotel. The evening air was pleasantly cool after the heat of the day, and stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "How are you finding work at the Thompson Ranch?" she asked. "Good. Honest work with fair pay. Thompson runs a tight operation." He glanced down at her. "The cabin they've given me is small but solid. It's been a long time since I've had a place to call my own, even temporarily." The hotel's dining room had been cleared for dancing. Lanterns hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the gathered townspeople. A small band played in the corner fiddle, guitar, and banjo, while couples already moved across the floor. Several people nodded greetings to Tansy, eyeing Victor with curiosity. Mrs. Thompson bustled over immediately. "Tansy, dear. And Mr. Xavier William says you're already proving your worth at the ranch." She beamed at them. "I'm so glad you both could come. The band is quite good. They've come all the way from Virginia City." They found seats along the wall, watching the dancers for a time. Victor was quiet beside her, and Tansy wondered if he was uncomfortable with so many people. "Would you care to dance?" she finally asked. "Or would you prefer to sit longer?" Victor looked at her with surprise, then smiled. "I would be honored to dance with you. I should warn you, though it's been some time since I've done this. I'm sure you'll remember." Tansy stood, offering her hand. His large hand enveloped hers as he led her to the dance floor. The band struck up a waltz, and Victor proved more capable than he'd let on. His hand rested respectfully at her waist as he guided her through the steps with surprising grace. "You dance very well for someone out of practice," Tansy teased. "I had a good teacher. My mother insisted all her children learn." His eyes held a warmth that made Tansy's heart beat faster. "Besides, it's easy with the right partner." They danced several more dances, stopping occasionally for refreshments or to chat with the Thompsons. Tansy was acutely aware of the speculative glances from the townspeople, but found she didn't care. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly happy. As the evening progressed, the band played a slower, more intimate tune. Victor's arm tightened slightly around her waist, drawing her a bit closer. "I haven't felt this way in a long time," he said quietly, his voice meant for her ears alone. "At peace." Tansy looked up at him, seeing something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Neither have I." The moment was broken by a commotion at the entrance. Frank Miller and 3 companions had arrived, already visibly drunk and loud. The hotel owner approached them, speaking in low but firm tones. Victor's body tensed. "Would you like to leave?" Tansy shook her head.
"No."
"I won't let him ruin our evening." They continued dancing, but Tansy could feel Frank's eyes following them around the room. When the song ended, Victor guided her back to their seats, positioning himself between her and Miller's group. "Would you like some punch?" he asked. "Yes, please." As Victor made his way to the refreshment table, Frank detached himself from his friends and approached Tansy. "Evening, Miss O'Connell. Saving a dance for me?" "I'm afraid my dance card is full, Mr. Miller." Frank swayed slightly on his feet. "Your cowboy can't keep you all to himself. This is a public social. Please leave me alone." Frank took a step closer. "You know, my uncle is looking to expand his holdings. That little shop of yours sits on valuable land." The threat was thinly veiled, and Tansy felt a chill despite the warm room. "Is that so?" "It is. Shame if something were to happen to it." His smile was cruel. "Fire hazards everywhere in these wooden buildings." "That sounds remarkably like a threat, Miller." Victor had returned, 2 cups of punch in his hands and a dangerous look in his eyes. Frank turned slowly. "Just having a friendly conversation, Xavier. Nothing for you to worry about." "Miss O'Connell doesn't seem to find your conversation friendly." Victor set the cups down on a nearby table, never taking his eyes off Frank. A tense silence fell over their corner of the room. Nearby dancers slowed, sensing the confrontation brewing. This town was peaceful before drifters like you showed up, Frank said, his voice rising. We take care of our own here. Is that what you call cornering a woman alone on the street? Taking care of your own? Victor's voice remained level, but Tansy could see the anger in the set of his shoulders. Frank's hand drifted toward his hip, where Tansy knew he carried a pistol. You should watch your mouth, Cowboy. Sheriff Taylor materialized beside them, his weathered face stern. Everything all right here? Just fine, Sheriff, Victor replied, not taking his eyes off Frank. Miller, I believe you've had enough excitement for one evening, the sheriff said. Why don't you and your friends call it a night? Frank's eyes darted between Victor and the sheriff. Finally, he stepped back with a forced laugh. Sure thing, Sheriff. Night's young anyway. Better entertainment at the saloon. He looked at Tansy. Remember what I said about fire hazards, Miss O'Connell? Can't be too careful. After he left, Victor turned to Tansy. What did he say to you? She told him about Frank's veiled threats to her shop. Victor's expression darkened further. I should stay with you tonight. Make sure he doesn't try anything. That's not necessary, she protested, though the idea of Frank returning later terrified her. I insist. His tone left no room for argument. The remainder of the social passed without further incident, though much of the joy had gone out of the evening. As the band played their final song, Victor and Tansy thanked their hosts and slipped out into the night. The streets of El Dorado Canyon were quiet as they walked back to her shop. Victor insisted on checking the alley behind the building and making sure all windows and doors were secure before entering. I'll sleep in the front of the shop, he said once they were inside. If Miller or his friends show up, I'll hear them. Victor, I can't ask you to do this.
You didn't ask.
I offered. He met her eyes steadily. I care about what happens to you, Tansy. The simple statement hung in the air between them, weighted with unspoken meaning. Tansy felt a warmth spread through her chest. I care about what happens to you too, she whispered. For a long moment, they stood looking at each other in the lamplight. Then Victor stepped closer, slowly, as if giving her time to move away. When she didn't, his hand came up to gently touch her cheek. May I? He asked softly. Tansy nodded, unable to find her voice. His lips met hers in a kiss, so gentle it made her heart ache. His hand cradled her face as if she were made of porcelain, and Tansy found herself rising on her toes to deepen the kiss, her hands coming to rest on his chest. When they finally parted, both were breathing quickly. Victor rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since I first saw you, he admitted. Even with 3 drunks threatening me? Tansy smiled. Especially then. You were afraid, but still stood your ground. It was impressive. Tansy reluctantly stepped back. I should get some rest. There are extra blankets in the cabinet if you need them. Victor nodded, his eyes still holding hers. Good night, Tansy. Good night. Sleep came slowly to Tansy that night, her mind replaying the kiss and the events of the evening. She woke several times, reassured by the sound of Victor moving quietly in the front of the shop, keeping watch. Dawn brought pale light filtering through the curtains. Tansy dressed quickly and found Victor already awake, folding the blankets he'd used. No trouble in the night, he reported. But I should check outside before you open the shop. While he did so, Tansy prepared coffee. When he returned, his expression was grim. What is it? She asked, alarmed. Someone poured a trail of kerosene along the back wall of your shop. They didn't light it, but the message is clear. Tansy felt her legs weaken. She sank into a chair, hands trembling. Frank Miller is making good on his threat. I'm going to speak with the sheriff. Victor's voice was hard with anger. This has gone beyond drunken harassment. What good will that do? Frank's uncle practically owns the town. Then we'll think of something else. Victor knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. I won't let anything happen to you or your shop, Tansy. I promise. She looked into his eyes and saw the determination there.
Why?
Why are you doing all this for me? because in all my years of drifting, I've never met anyone like you." He squeezed her hands gently. "And because for the first time since the war ended, I feel like I've found something worth staying for." The sincerity in his voice brought tears to Tansy's eyes. "I'm afraid, Victor. Not just of Frank, but of feeling this way about you. What if you decide to move on after all?" "I won't." He reached up to brush a tear from her cheek. "Tansy O'Connell, I think I've been wandering all this time just to find my way to you." She couldn't help but smile through her tears. That's a rather poetic statement from a ranch hand. "I read a lot on the trail." His answering smile faded quickly. "But first, we need to deal with Miller." Sheriff Taylor took the kerosene threat seriously enough to confront Frank Miller publicly. Frank denied any involvement, and without witnesses, there was little the sheriff could do beyond issuing a warning. Over the next few days, Victor spent every night at Tansy's shop, returning to the Thompson ranch at dawn to work. Mrs. Thompson, upon learning of the situation, insisted that one of their ranch hands accompany Tansy when Victor couldn't be there. A week passed without further incidents, but the tension remained. Tansy noticed some of her regular customers, those with ties to the Miller family, stopped coming to her shop. Business slowed, and she worried about making her next payment on the building. One evening, as they sat together after closing the shop, Tansy voiced her fears to Victor. "I might lose everything my father worked for." Victor was quiet for a long moment. "What if we left El Dorado Canyon? Together?" Tansy looked up in surprise. "Left? But this is my home." "Home is people, not places." He took her hand. "I've been thinking about it for days. Thompson mentioned his brother has land in California, good grazing land near Sacramento. He's looking for a partner with experience." "You'd want me to come with you?" Tansy asked, her heart racing. Victor's eyes were serious as they met hers. "As my wife, if you'll have me." The proposal was sudden but not entirely unexpected. In the weeks since they'd met, they'd grown closer than many couples who'd known each other for years. There was an understanding between them, a connection that Tansy had never experienced before. "Victor," she began, but was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass from the front of the shop. They rushed forward to find a rock had been thrown through the window. Attached to it was a note. "Leave town or burn." Victor's face hardened. "That's it. I'm ending this tonight. What are you going to do?" Tansy grabbed his arm as he headed for the door. "I'm going to find Frank Miller and make sure he understands that threatening you is the biggest mistake of his life."
No.
"That's exactly what he wants. He'll have his friends with him. It could be a trap." Victor hesitated, then nodded slowly. "You're right. We need to be smarter than him." They spent the night boarding up the broken window, taking turns keeping watch. By morning, Tansy had made her decision. "Yes," she said simply as they shared coffee at dawn. "Yes." Victor looked confused for a moment, then understanding dawned. "You'll marry me?" "I will. And yes, I'll go to California with you." She set down her cup. "But I won't be driven out by threats. I want to sell the shop properly on my terms. My father's legacy deserves that much." Victor's face broke into a smile that transformed his entire countenance. "We'll do it your way. And I promise you, Frank Miller won't interfere." True to his word, Victor arranged a meeting with Mr. Thompson and several other prominent ranchers in the area, men who had no love for the Miller family's growing influence. Together, they confronted Frank's uncle, presenting evidence of Frank's harassment and threats. The elder Miller, concerned about his business reputation, agreed to rein in his nephew. Frank was sent to oversee a mining operation in another territory, effectively removing him from El Dorado Canyon. With the threat diminished, Tansy was able to find a buyer for her shop, a young widow with dressmaking experience who offered a fair price. The sale would give Tansy and Victor enough to start their new life in California with a solid foundation. They were married on a bright autumn day, with the Thompsons standing as witnesses. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, held in the small church on the edge of town. As they prepared to leave El Dorado Canyon 2 weeks later, their wagon loaded with Tansy's belongings and wedding gifts from well-wishers, Mrs. Thompson pressed a package into Tansy's hands. "A small token to remember us by," she said, embracing the younger woman. "And an invitation to visit whenever you can." That evening, camped beside a creek on the first leg of their journey west, Tansy unwrapped the package to find a beautiful handmade quilt. "For our new home," she said, running her fingers over the intricate stitching. Victor sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders. "Our home," he repeated, the words clearly pleasing him. "I never thought I'd have one again after the war." Tansy leaned against him, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. "Tell me about this land in California. What will it be like?" "Green valleys surrounded by mountains. Good water. Land where we can raise horses and cattle. Maybe children someday."
I'd like that.
Tansy turned to face him. All of it. Victor's kiss was tender, but held the promise of their future together. When they parted, he looked into her eyes with an expression that made her heart swell. "I love you, Tansy Xavier. And I love you." She smiled at the sound of her new name. "My cowboy who wouldn't let me face trouble alone." As darkness fell around them, they talked late into the night, planning their future and sharing dreams. The challenges they'd faced in El Dorado Canyon had only strengthened their bond, proving they could overcome obstacles together. Morning found them continuing westward, leaving the Nevada territory behind. Tansy watched the landscape change as they traveled, each mile taking them closer to their new home. Beside her, Victor guided the horses with steady hands, occasionally glancing her way with a smile that spoke of contentment and love. The journey would be long, but they faced it together, a dressmaker who'd stood her ground, and a wandering cowboy who'd finally found a reason to stay.